You know how you make a name for yourself? Sign an extension in the offseason for millions of dollars. Some people are like, who's Colt Keith? Let's learn about him right now with this BA prospect profile. JJ Cooper, Carlos Collazo, I'm Scott Braun. JJ, who is Colt Keith? Because the Tigers have not been relevant the last few years. They're trying to get back on track, and Keith is going to be up on the big league roster right from the jump. He's a big dude, and I truly believe that he made a name for himself by signing an extension before he hits the big 6 years, $28.6 million. Is it worth it?
Yeah, because this is one of the best. Now, this is the Tigers. Like you said, they haven't been relevant in a while. And when you talk about Tigers and developing position players, homegrown position players, you're not going back to Trammell and Whitaker, but you don't have a whole lot of guys since then, sad to say. Colt Keith could help change that. Obviously, they already have Riley Green, Kerry Carpenter, Spencer Torkelson. They've started to develop some of these guys. But Colt Keith could end up being as good or not better, if not better, at the plate than some of those guys, because Keith is a guy who should be able to hit for average and power. The exit velocities are already impressive, but his ability to do that while making consistent contact is pretty special. Now the big question is going to be, how good is he defensively? And I think he could be good enough. I think he has the want to, the desire to turn himself into a playable second baseman, which is really, if he hits like we expect, all that you need from him. But Carlos, if I'd have told you coming out of the draft that Colt Keith would be the Tigers' everyday second baseman, would that have seemed plausible to you, or would it have been more of like, I don't think he can handle that defensive?
Actually, coming out of the draft, Colt Keith was playing shortstop, and there were questions at the time if he was going to stick at the position. Well-founded questions, it turns out. But he was a pretty impressive athlete. He had 60 grade running ability at the time, 60 grade arm strength, 60 grade raw power. I think at this stage, the raw power is one of those plus tools that we still feel pretty confident in. But you're right. If he can be a plus hitter with plus power and just a fringy defender at second base, I think the Tigers will be thrilled with that. I mean, he's a guy who has produced consistently in the minor leagues at the upper levels of the minors. He hits the ball hard. There are some strikeouts that comes with that, but I think he does a nice job lifting the ball and pulling the ball consistently enough to tap into that power. I heard last year from a few scouts who were kind of sneaky still excited about the adjustments he could continue to make as a defender, because I think that athletic foundation is still there, even if he doesn't move around as exceptionally as he used to coming out of high school. So I'm curious to see how he looks at second base, even if the expectation at this point for Colt Keith is that he's going to be very much a bat first prospect who you're just kind of living with defensively. If he can make the plays that come to him, knock down the routine plays and convert those, you'll be happy. But I am curious how he develops defensively in the big league level when everything gets a little bit faster, a little bit quicker. It'll be fun to see.
Do you guys have comps? Like, is this Dan Ugla with more of a hit tool, or I don't know, just trying to look for a bat first, second baseman, moving a position? What do you think, JJ?
Okay, it's not a perfect comp because I think that Edward Julian and him are very different how they get to their offense. But at this time last year, if you'd have told me that Edward Julian was going to get himself to be a 45 defender at second base, I'd have probably been very skeptical. And then you saw him last year do a really good job at the big league level of continuing to work at it, get better and better. And so I bring him up because Julian was an example of a bat first guy who the question was, can he play second base? Last year, he showed he could. He showed he could even for the Twins all the way, into the playoffs for them. I think Colt Keith, it's not crazy to think that maybe he can do the same kind of thing where you get him into the lineup because of his bat, but if he keeps working at it, you turn around at the end of the year and you say, he's okay there. He's okay there at second. It's interesting. A year ago, the Tigers had Colt Keith kind of at third base, Jace Young at second. Now they've kind of flipped them because I think that maybe they both fit better at those kind of opposite positions. But the key thing about all of this is this all fits with what I would say is kind of a new organizational philosophy for the Tigers, one that's probably going to pay off in the next few years, which is it used to be that the Tigers emphasized defense, they emphasized athleticism, and then they said a lot of times with the draftees, they would say, okay, let's see if we can help them hit. We can see if we can help them get to their offensive potential. Now, over and over, it's let's take bat first guys and let's see if we can improve their defense, which I do think is often easier to do. It's harder to help a guy learn how to hit than it is to take a guy who already can hit and help him work to get to where he can be a useful player defensively.
So I get that from a development standpoint, but then from a championship standpoint, run prevention becomes an obsession and it intensifies if you're a good team, especially come playoff time. So what I'm leading to is, let's just draw up a worst case scenario. What if he's not kicking it correctly at second base at the big league level? What is the backup plan here? Because it sounds like he could be a first baseman, but there's a dude named Spencer Torkelson there. And even at the DH spot, the Tigers are starting to graduate players and put themselves in a good position there. I mean, looks like Kerry Carpenter will fill that role, at least to start the season. So what do you do looking at the big league club and what's coming next for the Tigers if this doesn't work out the way that they have it planned?
He does have a first base. There are a number of guys for this Tigers team who first base, DH, left field are the fallbacks. But I do think that Keith also could end up being a left fielder. As Carlos mentioned, this is not a guy who doesn't move at all. Left field could also be potentially an option if it doesn't work at second base. A Colt Keith, we have a Justin Henry Malloy, we have a Jace Young, and all of them could be said to be like defensively challenged, the guys who are going to have to continue to improve defensively, and you could run out of spots.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think you look at a lot of these players, these young hitters in this Detroit organization at this point, and they are a lot of bat first players. So you really need to have Colt Keith look fine at second base. He doesn't need to be great. He needs to be playable there, get his bat in the lineup at a non-corner spot, because you just listed a number of these players. Justin Henry Malloy, he's got to play left field at this point. It doesn't sound like he's doing too much over at third base. Jace Young, there are not a ton of other places he can play. You've got outfielders like Riley Green and Parker Meadows, who you're not going to get better defense than those guys if you're a Colt Keith. So I really think it's pretty important for him to play the position and play it well enough to stick there, because all these other guys we're talking about are corner players. And at that point, maybe you need a lot of strikeout artists in the rotation, so you don't have to rely on them as much as possible. But I do think that I would still be a little more on the optimistic side until Keith proves otherwise, that he can be a playable and fine defensive second baseman.
No matter what, he's already got financial security. So I mentioned 6 years, 28.6 mil. That's through the 2029 season. If he's really good, they can keep him with club options for 3 more years. That would max out at around 9 years, $82 million, and take him through his age 30 season. Trivia question. Do you know a few other players that had a similar contract in terms of years and money? I've got 2, and maybe I'm missing some, but I've got 2 that come to mind that were in the 6-year, mid-20s range. Do you have any?
This sounds like the Kingery deal, right?
That's one, Scott Kingery. JJ, is that who you were thinking of?
Jonathan Singleton?
Singleton, although his was a little smaller, right? His was a little less.
Because it was enough years back that it was, yeah.
Yes. I've got one more for you. Ready for this?
Yeah.
Evan White.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Evan White. I believe it was 624 for him as well, and I'll confirm it in a sec. And obviously, White was known for the glove, and that hasn't worked out for the Mariners, and he's since moved on to another ball club. But those are the 2 comps in terms of the contract range. I think you can make a very strong case that Colt Keith has a lot more bat than those 2 players, and easier to say now.
I'm going to take the over on I'm going to take the Keith being the most productive of those contract extensions, which is a pretty low bar. I'll say that I'm thinking he'll clear.
Yep, there you go. So, little trivia at the buzzer here. Thanks for checking out this Baseball America prospect profile. We do this all the time, so check back here for more BA prospect profiles when prospects get called up.